There's a specific kind of person who sees a trend exploding everywhere and feels nothing. No pull, no urgency, no fear of missing out. Everyone around them is rushing to buy, wear, and say the thing, and this person is just watching, not because they're trying to be different, not because they're contrarian, not because they think they're better than everyone else, but because something inside them genuinely doesn't respond to the signal that makes everyone else move. And most people don't understand that. They call it stubbornness. They call it being difficult. They call it being behind. What it actually is a completely different psychological wiring. And today we're going to talk about exactly what that looks like on the inside. Here's what trend following actually is at its core. It's a response to social pressure disguised as personal desire. You see something everywhere. Your brain registers it as normal. Normal starts to feel necessary, and suddenly you want something you never thought about a week ago. That's not taste, that's contagion. The person who doesn't follow trends isn't immune to influence, nobody is. But they have a higher threshold for that contagion to take hold. They need more than repetition. They need more than visibility. They need more than everyone else doing it. They need a reason that has nothing to do with everyone else. And that's the first psychological difference worth understanding. Most people get their why from external validation. This is popular, therefore it has value. The person who doesn't follow trends builds their why from internal criteria. Does this actually matter to me, specifically, for reasons I can name? If they can't answer that question, they don't move. It doesn't mean they're closed off. It means they're running a different filter system. Now here's where it gets honest. This isn't always comfortable, because the world isn't built for people who don't sync up with the current moment. You go to a party and someone asks if you've seen the show everyone's watching. You haven't, you're not planning to. You go online, and the algorithm keeps pushing the thing, the outfit, the phrase, the product, the opinion. You scroll past it every single time, and it keeps coming back like the internet is personally offended by your indifference. You sit in a conversation where people are talking about something you have zero investment in, and you have two choices: fake engagement, or sit in the awkward silence of being genuinely uninterested. Neither feels great, because here's the part nobody talks about. Not following trends doesn't make you feel superior. It makes you feel out of place. There's a loneliness to it, not a dramatic, crushing loneliness, more like a low hum. A constant awareness that the shared cultural moment is happening and you're slightly outside the window, looking in. You're not sad about the thing. You're just aware that you're not in it. And sometimes, late at night, you wonder if something's wrong with you. If you're broken in some way, that makes the connection harder. If you're missing a social gene that other people have, you're not. But that feeling is real, and pretending it isn't would be dishonest. So what's actually happening inside these people? A few things, and they work together. First, high autonomy need. Psychologists talk about autonomy as a core human need, the need to feel like your choices are actually yours. For most people, this need is moderate. They can follow a trend and still feel like themselves. For the person who doesn't follow trends, this need is dialed up significantly. Doing something because everyone else is doing it doesn't just feel unappealing, it actively feels like a loss of self. It's not a rational calculation, it's visceral. Following the trend feels like giving something up, like handing a piece of your agency over to a crowd, so they don't. Second, low sensitivity to social proof. Social proof is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. We look at what others are doing and use it as information about what we should do. It works on most people, most of the time. But the person who doesn't follow trends is less moved by numbers, less moved by popularity, less moved by the fact that 10 million people bought the thing. 10 million people doing something doesn't register as evidence of quality. It registers as noise. They don't feel the pull that others feel. And because they don't feel it, they genuinely don't understand why you're rushing. Third, strong internal reference point. These people tend to have a developed internal sense of their own taste, values, and standards, built over years of paying attention to what they actually like versus what they're supposed to like. This internal compass is strong. It gives consistent readings, and it's hard to override with external pressure. When something new comes along, they run it through that compass first. If it doesn't align, not because it's trendy, not because it isn't trendy, just because it doesn't fit, they pass. This is why they're not contrarian. A contrarian avoids trends because they're trends. That's still the trend driving the decision, just in reverse. The person we're describing doesn't care either way. The trend's popularity is simply not relevant data. Here's where the world gets it wrong about these people. they get labeled as judgmental. They're not judging you for following the trend. They genuinely aren't. What looks like judgment is usually just distance, a lack of shared investment in the thing. But distance can look cold, and cold gets read as contempt. They also get labeled as rigid, which is almost the opposite of the truth. Most people who don't follow trends are deeply curious about ideas, history, craft, and things that have stood the test of time. They're not closed, they're selective. There's a difference. And they get labeled as difficult, particularly in social settings where shared cultural references are the glue that holds conversation together. Did you see? No. Have you tried? No. Everyone's obsessed with, I'm not. That's exhausting to people who use trends as social currency. It feels like the person isn't meeting them halfway. What they don't see is that this person will go deep on something they actually care about. Give them a real topic, something with weight, something with nuance, and they'll be the most engaged person in the room. They're not withholding. They're waiting for something worth giving their energy to. This is the part that needs to be said clearly. Because this psychological profile isn't all strength. The same autonomy need that keeps these people authentic can tip into isolation. If you can't ever sync with the cultural moment, if you're always outside the shared experience, connection becomes harder. Community becomes harder. Humans are social animals. We bond over shared things. Trends, as shallow as they can be, serve a real function. They create common ground, fast, efficiently, without requiring depth. The person who doesn't follow trends sometimes forgets that not everyone wants to go deep right away. Sometimes people just want to talk about the show, and refusing to engage, even a little, isn't always principled. Sometimes it's just inflexible. There's also a risk of turning "I don't follow trends" into an identity, into a performance. The moment you're proud of not doing the thing, the moment the not doing becomes the point, you've built a new trend. You're just trending in the opposite direction. The most psychologically grounded version of this trait is quiet. It doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need your validation for not needing validation. If you find yourself talking about how you don't follow trends, check yourself. The real version doesn't broadcast. It just lives. The cost is real. Slower social integration. More effort is required to find the connection. A constant low-level friction with a world that speaks in references you haven't downloaded. Sometimes missed opportunities, because the trend was pointing at something genuinely valuable and you dismissed it with everything else. Sometimes loneliness, real loneliness, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind that comes from being in a room full of people who are all excited about something you feel nothing about. That's the honest cost, and the return. A relationship with your own taste that's actually yours, not assembled from what was popular when you were 17, not patched together from whatever algorithm decided you should want this week. Decisions made with slower, clearer criteria, a longer attention span, the ability to sit with something long enough to know if you actually like it, not just if it's exciting right now. And eventually a kind of stability that trend chasers rarely find, because trends end, they always end, and the person built on top of them has to rebuild every time the ground shifts. The person who never built on trends doesn't have that problem. They were standing on something else the whole time. Not following trends isn't a personality quirk. It's a specific psychological makeup built from high autonomy need, a strong internal compass, and low responsiveness to social proof. It comes with real costs, loneliness, friction, being perpetually slightly out of step with the moment, and it comes with real returns, clarity, authenticity, a self that's actually yours. The world needs both kinds of people. The ones who move with the current, keeping culture alive, keeping connection alive, keeping the shared moment going, and the ones who stand still long enough to notice what's worth keeping when the current moves on. Know which one you are. And stop apologizing for it.